When he was in elementary school, he couldn't afford a pair of shoes. In high school, he was ridiculed by the headmaster in front of all students. His crime, he couldn't afford to have school uniform. My guest never gave up. He continued his education and obtained his BA with distinction and honored by the then president of the country, Mengistu Haile Mariam. He obtained his master's degree from Addis Ababa University later. He continued his education and obtained his PhD from Ghent University in Belgium. Currently, he is a campus administrator in Eastern Florida State College, United States. My guest is Professor Eyualem Abebe. We'll discuss his perilous journey in life and his commitment to give back to the community he has come from. You're watching Messenger. Professor Eyualem, I'm delighted to have you here in this program. I'm honored to have you here also.
Thank you first for the Amhara media for inviting me to share my life experience, and I'm grateful for that.
I think this would be a fantastic place to begin our interview. Let's go to the good old days. And what were your fondest moments and your saddest one, particularly in elementary school?
No, elementary school was a very happy time because typically, as somebody who is really involved in farm work, I was at home expected to contribute to the family work. So I would fetch food for the animals. I would be herding cattle as a part-timer, or in the summer I would work on the field. So I was a typical farmer boy. So school is a break, an absolute break. I mean, you would go and sit, you do nothing. So it was fun. And of course the games, you make friends. And so school was really a happy time. We learned a lot. I grew up in a school. I was educated in a model school. In IFAG was a model school at that time. So, you know, Americans used to come. The teachers we had, especially some of the few I remember, like Langano, were real role models to the community, not only to the school system and to the students. And this had a lasting impact on my thinking, my focus on education, even my skill in the language area, because he was an English teacher, and we revered him. We gave him a lot of credit to what he has done to the community in that area. So all that was positive, and I don't really remember anything negative as such, because I was very young. I finished elementary school by my ninth year. So I was 9 when I finished elementary school. I passed twice, double passed 2 grades. So and I'll tell you probably later, that helped me a lot. What helped me a lot was what I had before coming to the school system, and that's another story which I can share later. But really, elementary school was a real happy time. What comes later was the problem, because we had to walk 10 kilometers to go to the 7th grade in another city, which is Addis Ababa, which is about 10 kilometers. That was a difficult time, and that's actually one of the traumatic period in my life, because I had to live away from my family at 9, and then I had to stay there for some time for the first year. And then, of course, we decided to actually walk it both ways the same day. So we actually did 20 kilometers a day.
20 kilometers a day?
Yeah, for the rest of the high school period. Only the 7th grade was the year we stayed there a week. We used to go on Sunday evening to Addis Ababa, stay Monday, Tuesday, and Tuesday evening we walk back. And then we take food on Monday morning and come back on Friday evening. So we used to take what we call agalgal, and you would take injera with shiro on it, and that's basically what we ate every single day. And you know, that was basically the real challenging period. I would consider a challenge in school.
By all parameters, at age 9, if you just accomplish that primary school and move to the next level, you are a brilliant student back then. And the records prove that. When you compare the kind of attention children are getting in towns these days, a rural child out there has to do all the chores at home, and he considers the school at his time off, literally. So How do you compare those two situations?
These days, even rural areas are better off than the conditions we had to go through at that time. So, for example, when I went back to the school where I studied as an elementary school student, now even some of the children have bicycles to ride. I mean, at that time there was no one who had a bicycle. Now most of them actually had a bicycle to go to the next city as students. Of course, now there is a high school there already. So there is a huge change even in rural areas. So there is an economic growth, things have changed. But I really see this as a general societal change away from education. The value education had for families, for the society, and for students has gradually been deteriorating and have been degraded. And this cultural shift is reflected by, of course, the students not giving attention to their schoolwork or not even caring about failing. And we see that everywhere, and especially here in Ethiopia. And of course, there are other things that contribute to this. You can say social media has a role. The instability in our country for a number of years has contributed a lot. Looking at the economic growth in the country, I would have expected more focus on education. And it's saddening to me to see now the education over the years has actually deteriorated in the country. And there are many studies that show from higher education to the elementary school level that education is not given that much weight. And whether you are educated or not, the society doesn't give you that much value compared to others, like people with income, better income, and so on. So there is a certain shift towards giving value to having an asset than having education as an asset. So that's a reflection that I see. But still, rural communities are successful educationally, because as I remember, we once looked at, who actually teaches in higher education. Because higher education used to screen with a higher GPA, grade point average, to pick instructors. So the best of the group were picked to teach at university level. And we looked at, who were actually teaching there. And it was interesting, we saw only very few people who came from the cities. Most of the people teaching at the universities were originally from rural areas. This doesn't mean, of course, they are smarter or better than the ones from the city. It's possible the city people actually had better opportunities and traveled abroad, and the rural people took over the college environment. But you can see that there is success in effort. The rural environment is not a hindering factor, except for those who never had the opportunity to go to school. Of course, there are many friends of mine who are farmers now.
Who are tilling the land still.
Exactly. When I go back, I still meet them, and they say they are still working as rural farmers, doing the usual old traditional farming in Ethiopia. So it's disheartening to see them in that condition, because we had the same opportunity. Some of them were much smarter than myself, and yet they abandoned school and they remained there. So yeah.
You were going to school like 10 kilometers barefoot each day or most of the days of the week. And what is the energy that incentivizes you to make that journey?
This drive to get education is not personal, honestly. It was more societal. We have seen the teachers who came to teach elementary school in our school who became role models for the society, and everybody, our families, everyone were looking up to them for every advice. They were the ones who basically shaped the society, and everyone wanted to be like them. That's the first drive. But also, in my personal case, it was more of a family pride. My father considered my educational success as his pride, and he would encourage or push me a lot. And I did not mention to you, but he was the one who taught me the letters before I went to school. So actually I knew the alphabet before I was 3. So by 3 I knew all the alphabets. And the reason I was aware or I knew the alphabets is that my father was a very disciplinarian guy, and he used to teach me the letters while they had coffee. So coffee time is when the neighbors are there. He would call me and he would ask me what the letters were. And any missing, and if I miss a letter, I would be hit once.
Okay.
So very heavily punished. And, you know, which is easier, to remember your letter or to get hit? So the choice was easy. So I remembered all the letters perfect within a few weeks. Now, that encouraged me on one way. Now, my father was a bit early pushing me to go into school, but there was no school. Okay, the first person who came to the rural area to teach school, I don't think even he had a room, picked a room, but he started recruiting students. And my father, being prominent in the neighborhood, he heard about it and he said, you should go to school, so let's go. But I was very young, so I don't have any choice. I went with my father to the teacher. The teacher's name was Tsagao. Guy Tsagao was there, and Guy Tsagao had a rule, a policy that says the students who come to my school must be 5. They have to be 5 years old.
That is a minimum age.
That's it. That's the starting age. That was, I think he came from the education department, so they told him 5. So the measure, the way he determined age was I had to, or any one of us had to put our right arms above our head and touch our ear.
And then you have to touch here.
Yes, that was the test. And I failed. So my father was very disappointed and he begged him to put me in class. Guy Tsagao said no. So I went back home. But I knew my letters. And luckily, Guy Tsagao picked a room, like 3 or 4 doors. This is a simple neighborhood down our house. That was the school. In the school is a simple mud wall, tin door, you know, where and the tin is already broken. You can see through it. It's just a rural environment school. There were two rooms, but one of them was where he was teaching. So I have nothing to do at that time. I was probably 4 or so, so I just pushed myself there, and I was at the door and looking through the hall.
Through the hall.
Yes, because there was nobody. I mean, we're only a few kids here. I was looking. He was asking one of the students one letter. He was teaching them on a big white paper list of letters.
The classroom.
Yes.
You are just peering from
yes,
outside.
I was just peeping through the hall and looking at what he was asking. He was asking one of the letters, and he was teaching them, and he was asking them. He was a person who punished students physically, so everybody was scared. And they did not answer that letter, and I knew it. It was Pa, like Ethiopia. That Pa was the one that they did not know. So I put my mouth through the hole and said Pa and ran.
You answered it from the outside.
Yes, and ran away because it's a crime, you know. He is very serious. So I went home. In the evening, he came.
Okay.
So he came home, and I was very scared because I know my dad, if he told him that I broke the rule, I would be seriously punished. But he said, oh, does he know his letters? My father said yes. Oh, then send him tomorrow. So I went to school the next morning. And Guy Tsagao, instead of putting me in one of the chairs to learn, he asked me, do you know his letters? I said yes. So he divided the class into 2. Those who knew the letters and those who did not the letters. And he said, oh, you are not the teacher in the first one. There are no letters. So I became the teacher the first day I went to class. So I did not become a student. Actually, I became the teacher the first day, and I started teaching the letters I knew. That's how I started school in that environment.
It was amazing, an amazing story. You make it all the way from the outside to the inside. And your first class, you were not a student, you were a teacher. That really sums up who you are as a person, I think. From the resume, from your profile, all I have gone through, that sums up who you are, I think. Let's go to the next phase, that is high school. And you have told me previously in our pre-interview that you were once publicly ridiculed by the headmaster himself because you couldn't afford to wear a school uniform. Take us back to that day.
In high school, I was very young still. You see, my age, I was so young. In classroom, I was the youngest all the time. Most of the students in my classroom were much older than myself. And because of this, generally, I am a person who no one notices. But I have been looking at my academic work. I'm very focused. I did not have any distraction. I was not really young enough, grown enough to be distracted by any other factor. So my school grade was good. So over time, the teachers and the director knew me personally. And unfortunately, I am one of the least well-dressed students in school. And that's because my father did not really care about these things. And that's one of the challenging parts, that when you feel less than your friends, it's not a nice experience. So I did not really mix that much because of my lack of proper dressing. And there was a policy change in that all students had to wear uniform. When that policy came, the director, who knew I was very successful in my school at that time, I probably was in the grading system, I was the first or the second usually.
Okay, you're ranking first or second.
First or second. And there were students in the community who really dress well, who have, I don't know, you call them wealthy, but well-to-do families who care about their kids and dress them. So to explain that dress can impact academic performance and we should be very careful, he picked two individuals. One of them was one of the well-dressed students and myself. And he brought me up and he said, look, I know him, he's an excellent student, he performs well, but look how he's dressed. And look at this one, he's well-dressed and these students are in the same classroom. What do you think will this one think about clothes all the time? So it will be distracting, this one, so we should actually change the system to you wearing uniforms. It was an argument to have uniforms accepted by the school environment, which it did. But it wasn't a pleasant experience when you are picked in front of I don't know how many thousand students for not getting well dressed. Most of the people who are close to me knew me, so it wasn't surprising, but it wasn't a nice experience to sort of be in public at that level.
All eyes were just placed on you at that very moment. The limelight was on you. And what can that tell us about the teaching learning process, how it should be refined? Because you are absolutely obsessed with your education. If it weren't you, if it were some other student, that very moment would have crippled him.
Level of awareness of the impact of these kinds of activities is limited. I don't think any of the instructors, teachers, and so on would do anything to hurt students. But
intentionally.
Yes, intentionally. But
intentionally.
Some of the things, of course, when they don't know, and traditionally you would think this would help, but they didn't know how this would impact a student. And I'm sure if I did not have that background of already going through this repeatedly, because it wasn't new to me, a student might have been crushed psychologically, humiliated, or left school. It all depends on the background, preparedness, family support, and their mental state. Luckily, I have a strong mentality in that area, and I did not really, it didn't bother me that much.
Recently, I was reading about the curriculums, and one of the curriculums was a Montessori educational curriculum. And in that curriculum, respecting the child is one of the principles of that curriculum. Don't you think Ethiopia has to adopt such kind of curriculums that respects, values the student as the pillar of everything in the teaching learning process?
There is no simple answer to these kinds of questions. See, education works best if you integrate it with the culture. And if it grows organically from within the culture, that is the education that solves its own problems. It's my feeling and understanding that we imported education from abroad. Most of the curriculum initially designed even for, at that time, Haile Selassie University, was designed really by foreigners, and most of the curriculum was brought. I remember the textbook we used was Oxford textbooks were the ones we used. So there was some sense of lack of local knowledge in developing our own educational system. I think what you asked is an extension of that issue. We have not looked at what is the best way to raise our kids. As you know, traditionally, physical punishment is well accepted in the society. It may be changing now, but it was. And gradually it's changing, because studies show that you really don't change the behavior of a child by punishing them physically. You have to find another way of penalizing them. Also, the general view that the instructor knows all, they are all knowing, is a big problem. So there are many aspects of this to change it. If we go into saying, let's make students or children as the center, which means you have to start at the family level.
In our culture, we all have grown up in this culture, and children are the least respected family members. And as you have told us, they eat the leftovers of adults. All these have detrimental effects in their life. So how are you going to change that?
You cannot address this by looking at a certain aspect of society only. You need to look at this from every angle. The first one, of course, is simply educating the community. The community, to me, means educating women. So we need to focus on educating women, because it says you educate a man, you teach one, or educate one person. You educate a woman or a girl, you educate a family. So we need to focus on educating girls, really invest seriously on making sure all children, especially girls, go to school and get that education. That's the first thing the country needs to focus on. Now, in addition to this, if you want these girls to be successful, you need to have role models. So you have to encourage and reward students, especially girls, at all levels: elementary school, high school, university level, as well as at the government position level. All levels must actually reward those with capacity. And when I say here, I'm very careful, because sometimes there is a tendency to appoint with a quota system. That shouldn't be. You need to make sure that these individuals are qualified, they have the capacity to change things. That way, you will see the result by making changes. Otherwise, the people will say, well, this was assigned because of this political connection, this connection, that connection, and basically your work goes into the drain. So we need to be very careful in that, in educating girls. On the other hand, we need to invest in education more.
Let's go to your time in Addis Ababa University. You obtained your BA degree and master's degree from Addis Ababa University. And what was your time there? What were the best moments there?
As a high school student, I studied history and geography. So I don't know if you remember, the government used to assign students to any college they prefer or they like. So I was actually assigned to the science faculty at Addis Ababa University at Arat Kilo, and I wasn't a science student. So it was a huge shock, because I didn't know biology, I didn't know chemistry, probably a little bit of biology, but I didn't know any chemistry. So that was a huge shock to me when I was assigned. And it was simply sheer luck that I actually succeeded at the university level. I studied, yes. I did not even venture out of the campus to the city for 1 year. I stayed on campus, studied day and night without a break. I never had any break, because I didn't even have the money to take a break. I didn't even know where you would take a break anyway. So, and I was lucky to pass the first semester. I passed with a 2.0, barely.
That means on the brink. You were on the brink, literally.
But everyone who was with me actually they were dismissed. So
Yeah.
most people who knew me were shocked and surprised that I passed and stayed, because to everyone I was the one, the most appropriate student to be dismissed from the school was me.
Yeah.
So I consider that sheer luck. I worked hard on it, but honestly, there were better qualified students who could have or should have stayed on that campus for the second semester. They didn't. But after that semester, things changed. When I had earned the first B or A in the second semester, I realized, wow, I can make it. And that opened the door. After that, it was easy. And I had a good time after that, because I really scored. I knew how to study. I knew the resources. I had a good grade. And I didn't even know I had the best grade in the department until in the graduation hall. I was sitting with my friends, and the dean, was it the dean or was he the dean or the registrar, Mr. Marshall, he was an English guy or Irish guy. He, at the university for the graduation ceremony, when we were with our gowns and sitting and waiting for the president to come. At that time it was President Mengistu. He was running around calling my name, and because of his accent I couldn't really hear what he was saying. And then he finally came to the biology side, and when he called my name, they said, "Oh, he's calling you." I said, "Yes." And he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "What? You need to be here." So he took my hand and took me to the front row, and sat in front of the president at that point. And I didn't know what was going on. And that's the time I realized I was the best student in the department. And I received the diploma from President Mengistu. But I didn't know. So this being unaware of my success also helped me, because I always strived, because if I knew I was the best, I probably would have relaxed. No, I worked hard until the last moment. And what I consider the best moment for me was when I was picked to be part of a research project. I had a very kind and extremely supportive instructor. Currently Professor Suyu Mengistu. He's a professor now. At that time he was not. He had a research project, and at that time they used to pick students with a certain GPA to do research, and I was one of the 2 or 3 that were picked, and I picked that project and I worked with him. He was not only an excellent professor and so on, he is also academically one of the exceptional instructors and professors there. Yeah. But he was also a very kind person who understood my background, and as part of the project he had some fund to pay me. So he actually paid me 30 Ethiopian birr per month, which I didn't know. So I didn't pick that money. And before graduation he asked me, what are you going to wear? I said, what do I wear? I'm going to wear a gown. What about the money? He said, what money? The money I have been paying you every month. What money? And he said, haven't you received any money? I said, no. So he just stood up, held my hand, walked from Arat Kilo to 6 Kilo with me. He went to the accounting department and he said, where is his money? So they were a bit shocked. So he really asked every office and found my money. And I think I got paid that day probably 90 Ethiopian birr. So this was for 3 months payment. Yeah. So, and I bought a shirt for graduation. So, and he helped me write my thesis. I think my interaction, that simple, apparent simple interaction with Gaisiyum, that I always call him Gaisiyum, actually changed my trajectory.
You have obtained your PhD from Ghent University, and I was impressed by the motto of the university. And I read it, it says, dare to think. Ghent University has produced 2 Nobel laureates, and our universities are older. Some of them are nearing a century, but still we don't have any Nobel laureates from our universities. How disheartening is that?
If you look at the interview laureate, the Nobel laureates have spoken on their speech, what they said was, it's really easy to have or get a Nobel Prize. What you need is a good teacher. That's it. If you can have a good teacher, you have the best students who will be developing to go into the highest level of research. So we need to structure the higher education system to recruit more students and mentor them. We need to have a way of, basically you have to restructure the higher education system where you need to create the highest quality professors. The highest quality professors must mentor the next following postdocs. These postdocs must mentor the next group of master students and undergraduate students. That structure, they have had it for 200 years. Ours is really recent, and it takes a while. And of course, our country has been in a struggle. Look how many government changes, policy changes, the instability in higher education. It's a huge change. So societal stability is one factor, but also the investment on education, the amount of funding they invest on education or research. When I say education is not salary, on research is what leads to the refinement of research and creating these kinds of higher level of research faculty. Most of the research that have been done in Ethiopia was more of applicable and service level research. And the applicable and service level research is not the one that actually is funded for or granted in the Nobel system, because the Nobel system is fundamental research that changes the whole way of thinking. The way things are applied is what is focused on. And maybe now, but until now, most of the research in Ethiopia has been really focused on addressing our own major problems. And it's not even that much. To me, it's still shallow in many ways. And we need to expand research in the country. We need to make decisions based on evidence. It should not be based on the opinion of a policymaker, a politician, or a professor. It should be based on the evidence we have. And economics, political, or social, or environmental decisions must be made based on that. And to do that, we need the data from research. And we need to focus and invest more on this. And I think a good speech that I remember is Professor Masfin once said, ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ እውቀት ከጉልበት ይመነጫል. In Ethiopia, knowledge comes from power. And what he was advising was Prime Minister Meles to actually use knowledge as a source of power. If we shift into using knowledge as a source of power, I think the community will change. And that's where the research comes.
If we dare to think.
Exactly.
In the US, we have people like you who are working in the education sector at the highest level. In the country that you are working, in the United States, the role of the private sector in education is massive. How are you going to emulate that?
United States is basically a country that has already accumulated wealth, has a different system, has been very stable. So the education that we have at the moment in that, most of the fundamental research is done by the government, by the way, by state universities, really. Private universities are there, very critical and very important private universities, but most of them have endowments. They have funding which can serve them for the next 100 years. So they pick the best students, they pick the best instructors, the best professors, and they challenge them. They give them absolute freedom to do what they want. Now, creating this system and copying it here is going to be an ambition that I hope will happen, but it's going to be extremely difficult because of the economic investment that you need, because the balance. You have a population that may be starving, and you want to invest in that kind of educational system, and you will have always people who will argue, is it worth it? You need to save human lives on the other hand, and on the other hand you want to actually improve science so much that it will address this hunger and other problems, health problems we have. So it's a balance, but it is not something impossible. There are already budding private institutions, but we need to hybridize government and private institutions to actually create better educational system. And focus on quality. And one of the things I'm not happy about Ethiopian universities is their sheer size. They have expanded extremely without focusing on quality. And if we focus on quality, I think we can go towards that kind of hybridization. And there are some universities, like even Bahar Dar University is trying to mix, and some of the two technology universities are trying to hybridize, work with private companies. But this should be really pushed to be faster. With the speed can be facilitated a bit better than what is now. But funding support is important, freedom for the universities, and picking the best quality instructors and professors is important. And at the moment it's a challenge. When even university professors are moving from one region to another because of security issues, you're not going to have a college or an institution that will be extremely well prepared to produce results that are at the highest level. We really need to focus on social stability first and then the education. At the moment it's a challenge. I can assure you, I understand what everyone is trying to do. It's not easy.
At elementary school you couldn't afford a pair of shoes, and at high school you couldn't afford a decent clothing. Now you are a campus administrator in Eastern Florida State College in the United States, and you overcome those challenges. But still, there are millions of Ethiopian students who are walking barefoot to school each day, who don't have a decent clothing, a decent food. How are you paying back the community you have come from?
You have to help yourself first, and then your family, and then you can go further into your community. And you try to help in the best possible way to produce maximum impact. And my family have tried to help all of them to go to school, college, and graduate, which they did. On the other hand, at the community level, it may be easy, but where I am, I have been 10 years at in Virginia, and I worked with others to establish an Ethiopian community there, Ethiopian Community Association. And that Ethiopian Community Association, the focus has been to help the young and the children to make sure they become better than us, perform and achieve, learn from our mistakes and become successful. And in that light, I have served that community as a president, basically I was the one who established it with the others, and have been a president for 6 years until I left the area until March. And that community has become a big success now. At least we give awards to students. Many of the students are successful, unlike in other places. Most of our students are now, the community even is going to establish scholarships for students to study there. So that's one, I think, that brought in, because it's not easy to bring in the community together because of the current division here. There are divisions there too. And what we did was we brought everyone together, Ethiopians and Eritreans, and that community is strong. And we have supported, for example, we have supported twice. Once when COVID came, we supported those who have sight problems in Addis Ababa. We provided food for 164 families from that community during COVID, because we thought those who are challenged with their sight is challenged will not be able to go out and do their work, because that would be a major hindrance. The second part was during the 2 years war here. That community has been very supportive, and for Afar and the Amhara region, we have supported, I think we might have sent about $40,000 worth of medicine. The medical group came and worked. We had also collaborated with the medical group working there, and they came and worked in Wollo primarily, and Afar. And they did some surgery and provided nutritional food for kids, and some help, general help for the population. So that's another one in organizing. But here at the university level, one of the things we have been doing is in the last 5 years, with the help, or actually with the initiation of Dr. Freu, who is the president of the Bahar Dar University, a group came together to find a way to help universities in Ethiopia by starting with Bahar Dar University. So we are using Bahar Dar University as a nucleus, but the goal is to help others as well. And through that unit, which we call AFRI, and it's now currently a non-profit. I'm here personally, I'm not representing AFRI, but as part of AFRI, we have also tried to help the university, and we have given many seminars, workshops, trainings to faculty, even to administrators at some point. So that support, the trainings actually include all universities. Sometimes I think one or those two trainings, 53 of the Ethiopian universities, all of them participated in those. These are virtual trainings or conferences that we provide. So these seminars are very helpful. They inspire the young. They are meant to show that how things are done abroad, and so that they can actually copy some things and be inspired. But we would like to go further than that. You know, there are programmatic developments. I know one of the team members is developing a curriculum here for the Bahar Dar University to develop a new program that helps Ethiopians in health. So these collaborations are based on the principle that individuals or groups cannot really give money from there if you want to change a community. We need to provide knowledge and a way of earning from abroad, especially research grants. How do you write a research grant? And how do you get that funding? How do you become competitive? How do you improve your writing skills? These are the things we try to communicate and help and train with. But we're doing a little bit. It's not easy. Change is a long process, but currently we're working as a group with that as well.
We have to end it here. Dr. Eyualem Abebe, thank you for your time in talking to us.
Yeah, well, I would like to appreciate you and your team for inviting me here. And I would like to thank my family as well as the teachers and my family back home, my wife Elizabeth and my two children at home, Hewan and Omi, and my grown-up son Eyob, who have been very helpful and supportive all the time. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, and especially the teachers at Addis Ababa University and Ghent University. I would like to thank them. Thank you.
I hope this will not be the last time. We'll meet again some other time. Dear viewers, you have been watching Messenger from Amhara Media Corporation. I'm Yohannes Eyualem. Thank you for watching.